You know what? I hate being wrong. And today I'm wrong and Mark is right. And what we're talking about is what happened with interest rates. I've been talking about how interest rates will keep coming down or they'll at least, stay where they are. And Mark's been telling us on the podcast probably for the last 12 months at least. I'm telling you, interest rates going to keep going up and things will, other things will happen. And here we are on Tuesday. Was it Tuesday last week? I think it was. But they've
Yeah, last
increased
Tuesday.
last Tuesday, right? They increased the cash rate by 0.25. It is now at 3.85% for those of you guys that have been living under a rock. And I want to, I'm always the optimistic kind of guy and thinking, because Australia is backed so much by real estate that they would not increase rates for that exact reason. And Mark has been telling us total opposite. You win. Look at his little grin on his face. He's been loving this.
He's got more receipts than Woolworths at the moment across the internet about his claims.
Look, mate, I don't know if I'm smiling. The RBA cut rates 3 times and then within 6 months had to hike again. I don't know if that's a policy decision or an admission that they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah, it is an issue.
Mark, given the fact that you are, coined macro Mark, you study the markets more than the other three of us on here. What's going on? Give us the breakdown in layman's terms so everyone can get a clearer picture that's not from the mainstream media perspective.
Well, I mean, look, high level, and I've said this multiple times, we went from the 1980s where interest rates peaked at about 17% to 0. And when that happens, when a chart goes from 17% down to 0 over a 40-year period, you don't have to be, and then it reverses and it starts going back up. You don't even have to know much about macro to know that there's probably been a regime shift, like a structural regime shift and a change. And that I believe has happened. I believe that the reason that they lowered rates is political pressure and a lot of the country owning property, right? And being not a lot of the country, people within the country owning property and people being impacted by repayments. And as soon as they had like a little bit of cover to drop rates, they dropped them. But if you look within the developed world, Australia is now, other than Japan, is the first country to start raising rates again because our inflation went from 3.6 to 3.8%, right? And so the issue, my issue is, and the reason why I think that interest rates will be heading higher over the long term, or they might just chop around, right? We might go up another percent and then come back down, and we might just chop around and go sideways for the next 5 years, right? But structurally, I don't think they're going lower, is because all the things that are causing, or the things within the inflation that are causing the higher inflation, they're structural things. They're not necessarily because we're spending more at the grocery store or because we're buying shit tons more TVs or anything like that. They're structural things. It's cost of housing, it's healthcare, it's the basket of goods that are structurally a bit busted that keep going up in price. They're things that we as the consumer demand side don't really have control over. It's more a government phenomenon. So it's like they're the arsonists and the firefighters, right? Like, and they're just
It's the
bone around the whole issue.
It's the cost of Tim Tams for me, mate. Like it used to be like $2 for an entire, and now it's like $8. I'm like, what the hell, dude? Like that's the craziest thing for me. That's where I'm really feeling it,
They, yeah, it's
That's because you're flying them in from Australia to Dubai now.
Yeah, I mean,
that big extra freight.
that could be part of it.
But that's the thing, right? Like, and that's where inflation bites, right? But they're saying it's household spending is up and investment is up. But the more and more people I talk to, it seems like they're doing it tougher and tougher. So, like you said, if they're not spending it on TVs and they're not doing this and they're not doing that, then what are they actually spending it on? Because what I'm seeing is, you go out for dinner on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like you can't get in. It is packed everywhere now, especially here on the Gold Coast. Now, before it used to be, just during holiday seasons. Now it's busy. I'm seeing more and more people complaining that they don't have the money. And then on the flip side, I'm seeing more and more people actually spending money. And this is the phenomenon that you were talking about, right? It's like there's too much, there's too much demand. This is basically what it is, right? What they're saying is, hey, you stop spending money, right? I'm going to increase interest rates so that way you have less disposable income to spend on things, which will then put less pressure on the actual supply side. But what you're saying is, yeah, what are you saying, Mark?
Yeah, well, the phenomenon that you're describing, just to give it an explanation, is called the K-shaped economy, and that is a phenomenon that's happening across all major countries at the moment. And the K-shaped economy is when it's basically a K shape, right? You got the rich, the top 10%, which are accounting for the majority or the 50 to 60% of spending. There's never been more money in the world than what there is today. And so that rich 10%, they're as wealthy as they've ever been through asset price gains, right? Gold, silver, Bitcoin, whatever it is, property that they own, they're loaded. So the places that you're frequenting when you see them being packed are that K shape doing all the spending. Then you've got the majority of the people within our economy and within our country who are struggling, who don't own monetary assets that have gone up over the last 5 years, and they're spending less, right? So you've it's a shit situation, but that's the situation that we find ourselves in. And like I was saying earlier, housing supply, service costs, weak productivity, right? These are the things that are causing the higher rates of inflation, and they are not demand side.
And we have a tight, like a pretty tight labor market, right? Like the unemployment rate is quite low. But what happens is people are still complaining that wages aren't high enough, right? But isn't it the case that if they increase interest rates and the businesses that we're in start reducing in revenue, in sales, and profitability, as an example, that would put more pressure on wages to come back or
The the
unemployment
the
to go up?
what we need, and this has been the biggest problem,
Unemployment, sorry.
especially in Australia, right? What we need is a boost in productivity, because wages can only go up with a boost in productivity. You think about it, right? For a business to be able to pay more, they need to be increasing their profit margins. If businesses can increase their profit margins through an increase in productivity, then they can afford to pass that on and pay their wages, pay higher wages. That's been the biggest issue, especially in Australia. We've had one of the shittest productivity scores in the entire Western G7 world, right? And Heather, this is
I was going to say, so how do you squeeze more productivity out of the same orange that's been there for, your workforce has been there for X amount of years, and then put the screws on them
well, this is like you think about how dire everything is today and how stressed out people are about the future. Imagine that we didn't have AI as a potential hope for the future. This is now the cart that everybody is hitching their wagons to. They're hitching their wagons to the AI cart. That there is the hope, and it's likely to turn out to be true. Who knows how long it's going to take to get there? But the hope and the goal is that businesses, organizations, governments, countries can all become more productive through AI, because it's not coming through the traditional ways. You can no longer increase workforce, hire more people, and expect better productivity, right? So this is a massive structural shift, and this is
What
this
what
is why I'm caught between structurally higher for longer and the AI actually finally doing what it's supposed to do and causing massive deflation.
Mm,
Right? But I
mm.
still think that's a story for another day. At the moment, I think we're gonna have to deal with the structurally higher inflation.
There's a lot of debate around inflation in Australia, around government spending, right? Rather than it coming from private, right? Coming from public as the government. What are your guys' thoughts? Because as soon as I hear about government spending, I hear about, you think about, NDIS and these types of things. And I know people that are in those types of businesses that are making really good money and are upping their charges and the rest of it. What are your guys' thoughts on the battle between, because you got, Jim Chalmers, the treasurer, rejecting that fact as an example, saying it's more pointed towards, global factors and demand pressures from obviously us as consumers rather than government spending. Do you think that's the case, or do you think that the government is spending a lot more, considering there, I forget what it was, but we talked about on a pod before where there's a high percentage of government workers as an example.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think the level of government spending is a problem, right? I think it's where they're spending,
Mm.
right? It's like if you're a business, Eric, uh, and you're not spending, like, okay, I'll give you an example. Over the last 12 months, I spent $400,000 to $500,000 on my e-commerce business that I didn't make a return on. And
Mhm.
so that is highly detrimental to my business, and it's going to increase my it's going to impact my bottom line, and it's wasted spending, and it hasn't raised productivity within my business. The same rules apply to governments. If governments are spending money in areas like NDIS, right?
Yep.
Yes, okay, there's a case to be made that we need to look after disabled people, etc. But there's so much
Fraud.
scam and fraud and shit that's going on in that industry that it's an easy argument to be made that that's wasted spending, right?
Mm.
Whereas we could be spending that money in other places. This is why you're seeing the US and China spend so much money on the AI industry and putting price floors on critical minerals and doing all kinds of interventionist things. Like the Americans are running a Chinese playbook. The amount that they're getting in trouble, getting involved and taking stakes in companies like Intel and Mountain Pass Mining, etc. But they're doing it in the hope that the AI can bring productivity. My biggest concern with Australia is I look around and I see where they're spending money, and I don't see any hope, right? Instead, I see, and we'll talk about this today, no doubt, I see them trying to claw back CGT tax and trying to increase taxes on property owners and trying to spend more money with government handouts, etc. So, that's an issue, especially for us business owners who are watching the show. It's like, well, what the future isn't looking bright here if they keep spending with those patterns.